All right, thank you everyone for checking out this video. In this video, we're going to continue on our load balancer series, and we're basically going to set up our standard load balancer. And also in this video, I'm going to show you guys how to set up a scale set with a standard load balancer as well. So we're going to create our load balancer. And also it's the same process as doing the basic load balancer. What you do is just go ahead and you set up your you get your resource group. As you get your resource group, go ahead and get your name. So we want to give it LBSTD. I'm gonna call it test. And we want to make it standard, make it a standard load balancer. We will make it public, like we did on the basic video, and we'll go regionals. All this is pretty much the same as what we did before. So let's go and do FE dash standard, do front end standard, and then I'm going to go ahead and create a new IP. And I'm going to do FE dash IP, and I'm going to put STD for standard. And I'm going to leave it at Microsoft Network. Leave everything the same. All right, let's go ahead and hit OK. Then we hit add. All right. So now we have our front end IP, and all we're going to do is from here, we're going to go ahead. We're not going to worry about backend pools or anything like that or tags. We're just going to go ahead and hit create and review, create and review, or review and create, whatever. And then we go ahead and we just click create. And also, just once again, you can look right here for download the template for automation purposes as well, if you wish to, do some development work. All right, so right now it looks like our standard load balancer has been completed. Let's go ahead and check our resource group to make sure that it's there. All right, yep, so we see it there. So we see it right here. So we see, no, that's the basic. Where is it? So it hasn't provisioned yet. All right, there it is. So it's showing. STD, yep. All right, so we got our standard load balancer created. Now we're gonna go ahead and create our scale set. Now, what is a scale set? Now, in the previous videos, I showed you how to set up a virtual machine uh, with a basic load balancer. It'll be the same thing with the standard. You set them up the same way. And also, in the previous video, I showed you how to set up a availability set with a load balancer. So we went over that. But the main difference, but availability set is basically you basically grouping. So let's go over let me first go over backtrack. Let me go over what availability set is. You're grouping virtual machines into a single group, and then you are basically having it so that they are able to basically act as a HA pair. However, if both the machines get a load on them, then you're going to basically have to either take time yourself to scale up the instance or scale down the instance or whatever, or either add more instances to the load balancer. In this case, we're going to use a scale set, where a scale set could do pretty much the same as a availability set. Only difference is when it comes to managing the instances, which is the virtual machines, uh, the scale set will take responsibility in basically adding and removing instances to basically take load off the other instances, which would be the other virtual machines in the connected to the load balancer. All right, so if you understand that, please let me know. If I'm clear in my explanation, please go ahead and leave a comment in the comments below. If I'm not being very clear, just put that in the comments. All right. So let's go ahead and create our scale set. What you do is you go into your search bar. For me, it's in the recent services, but then what we'll do, we go ahead and type in scale set. If you don't see it there, and it'll be right here. If you type in scale, it'll be right here. Virtual machine scale sets. You click on it. Right now, we have none in our account. And what you do is you go ahead and click create. All right, so now same thing is the same process as setting up a virtual machine. What you do is you set up your resource group. After you set up your resource group, you give it a name. I'm gonna call it VMSS. I'm gonna call it Lin because it's gonna be a Linux box. I'm gonna keep it in the same region that the resource group is connected to. Plus, our load balancer is in the West region too, so we will make sure it's in the same region as our load balancer. Leaves orchestration mode as default, and we're gonna go ahead and basically we're gonna keep it as our CentOS based OS. Like I said, if you don't see this, you could easily just go into here and just scroll down scroll down many different instances and select, or you can just click on see all images and just search and just query for it in the marketplace. If you don't know how to do that, we went over that. We went over that in video 2, how to set up a virtual machine. So that would be something to take a look at if you don't know how to go search the marketplace. Also, we have our B1S instance that we're going to be setting up. And once again, if you do not see if you follow along, everything should be if you follow along in this video series, you should see everything should be set to default. But if you do not see this, you go ahead and select that drop down arrow. You're going to select whatever size you want, or just go in here, click see all sizes, and select whatever size that you want. Just be mindful of the cost. All right. And what we're going to do, we're going to use an existing Azure key pair that we have that we created in a previous video. We're going to select our key pair here, and we'll go ahead and click next. Make sure to always change the disk size, the SSD size from premium to standard. And then make sure to go ahead and go to networking. In this case, we want to select our virtual network that we have in our resource group. I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to make a couple of changes. I'm going to edit the in-network interface. I'm going to leave the name as default, but what I want to do, I want to make a public inbound for it. We can open HTTP and also SSH on it in case I need to log in, and also give a public IP. And this just gives me the ability to be able to access the instance through the internet. Well, access the virtual machines individually through the internet. Now, instead of just going and creating a backend pool in the load balancer, what I'm going to do, I'm going to create it right here because we already showed you how to set up the backend pool, how to set up a backend pool in the load balancer in the basic video. I'm going to show you how to do it now within the scale set because it's going to be the same thing. And when you're setting up a virtual machine, it's going to say the same thing. Use a load balancer. So you go here, you go say use a load balancer. And we just go and select our load balancer, the one that we just created, which is our standard right here. And currently we do not have a backend pool, so we go ahead and create a new one. We go and name it BE pool 1. That's why well, I'm going to use BE pool 1. And I'm going to click create. And there you go. We see we have our backend pool created. So it's going to add this scale set to this backend pool as it's provisioning. So we're going to go ahead and go to scaling. Now this is the meat and potatoes of the whole scale set process. If you leave it as manual, it's going to set up by default. It's going to set up 2 instances by default. And if you leave it as manual, you basically have to set all the scale set policy and everything up manually. However, you go to here to click custom. You go ahead and you can view this, and you can see a couple of things. One, you can see the minimum number of instances that the scale set is going to manage, and that's self-explanatory because that goes over basically how many instances do you want at minimum do you want the scale set to manage at all times. And in this case, we have plenty that you want to. We have in this case we're just going to do 2. For my case, I'm just going to do 2. Because even though our desired amount is our desired that we want is 2, I want to keep the minimum at 2 because if it ever scales up and adds a scale down, it's going to go all the way to 1. So 1 instance. I don't want to go down to 1 instance. I want to keep it at 2. So, and the maximum is actually self-explanatory because as it's scaling up, what is the maximum number that you want the scale set to manage? How many? I'm going to go up to 4. And we go to scale out, the scale out policy, which says if CPU's at threshold is at 75% or more, for a duration of 10 minutes, increase the number by 1. All right, so what that means is if the CPU is more than 75% after 10 minutes, increase the numbers of virtual machines by 1. So that means after 10 minutes, it'll scale up to 3. If it goes another 10 minutes and it still haven't ceased, go ahead and scale up by another 1. All right, so that's it there, and it's going to keep going until it gets to 4. All right, so then we're going to go ahead, we're going to set up our, and then also below that, we got our scale in policies. Now, if it's below 25% for a duration, for a specified period of time, for 10 minutes, it's probably going to go ahead and decrease by 1. Another 10 minutes, if it still stays the same at 25% or less, then it's still going to be less. It's still going to decrease. It's still going to decrease by 1. And what I'm going to do, I'm going to scale. I'm going to put this up a bit. I'm going to put about 30%, and that's pretty much it. And then here's our scale in policy down here. You get three of them. And what it's going to do is going to set is basically going to basically scale in. So as it's scaling down, which instances do you want this uh, scale in policy to remove? So by default, it's going to basically try to check to make sure that there's balance across. There's a balance between a balance of virtual machines between the availability zones. So it's going to make sure that you always have a HA pair in most cases, and that's what you have it set up that way with 2 instances or more. It's going to try to maintain availability across all availability zones, and then what it's going to do is going to remove the instance with the highest instance ID. So the instance ID is basically the ID that's given to the instance by the scale set. The next thing you see is the newest virtual machine. So it's basically going to remove the newest virtual machine as it's scaling down. And then the last one is going to scale as it scale down. It's going to start removing the older virtual machines and keep the newer ones. So you got one where it's going to remove the highest instance ID. You have the one that's going to maintain the newest ones and remove the old ones, and then you have the one where it basically keeps the old ones and remove the new ones. All right, but I'm going to leave it at default in our case. Click manage, and we'll go ahead and and this is where it's the upgrade policy. And here is the monitoring for diagnostics. What we're going to do, we're going to leave this disabled right now. We're going to do a whole nother video on the scaling of the scale set as well, where we're going to do a little bit more of a deep dive into a lot of these things. So, but yeah, you can still go into here. You can go into diagnostics, and you could be able to go ahead and choose your diagnostics where you want your logs to be put at, your boot logs to be put at, and also you can disable it. And also you got your upgrades, your upgrade policy. Do you want to have it so that when it comes to updates, if the instances are ever out of date, let's say you make a change to the scale policy and they're ever out of date, do you want to update the instances yourself manually, or do you want to go ahead and have it so it's done automatically where it just selects a random order, or do you want to have it do a rolling update? Okay, so in my case, I like doing it randomly I'll do it randomly, especially for testing purposes. If it was production, I'd probably go with rolling. But I'll go ahead and leave diagnostics on and select the storage account, the demo diag, and leave everything else default. Not enabling health monitoring and advanced. I'm going to go ahead and select that script that we did in the previous video for the scale for the standard load balancer. For the basic load balancer that we typed out. All right, so I kept it because I kept it in like a nice little notepad document for us. And also pretty much if you want to know what the script does, basically all it does is just install Apache, then set up, and basically the instances just gives its name. But if you want to know want to know what line by line what each command is doing, you could watch the previous video on the base load balancer. That's video number 2, I believe, or it's number 1, 1 to 2. Just watch the series on the basic load balancer, and you'll be able. I go basically. I explain line by line what each command is doing. So let's go ahead and click. So now after this, we pretty much are done. Let's go ahead and hit review and create. All right, and just make sure you review what everything you did, and just go ahead and click create. So just like in the previous videos, it's going to take a while for it to go ahead and provision. So we're gonna go ahead and pause the video and then come back once it completes. All right, be right back. All right, so we just pretty much the deployment just finished, and we're gonna go ahead and go inside our scale set. All right, so let's go ahead and click on our resource group, and we go to our standard load balancer here. And what we're going to do, we're going to first make sure that our backend pools are created, which it is. Here's our instances. Our instances has been attached to it. And then we got our probe here. Actually we didn't set our probe up yet. So let's go ahead and set that up. All right, so we can go do HP dash, basically it's the same as the previous video. Like we did in the basic series, we're going to do HP to give it a name. And I'm going to change the protocol to HTTP. Keep it at the slash. Intervals, only have it so it checks every 10 seconds, and for every unhealthy count for every 20 seconds, if the instance if its instance is reporting back as unhealthy, the load balancer would then not use that instance any longer. It will basically go ahead and just use only one if the instance is unhealthy. It's detecting as unhealthy after 2 consecutive failures. All right, so we can go ahead and add that. Takes a minute sometimes to deploy this. Oh, it didn't take that long. All right, so now we're going to set up our load balancer rules. Okay, LBR, and we're going to go same as the basic video. LBR STD. We're going to leave it at that. Select our front end IP. Select our backend pool. The port is going to be 80. The backend port is going to be 80, and the health probe is going to select your health probe. And then once again, we already went over what these are. We're not setting up a sticky. We're not setting up any sticky sessions. And all the rest of this, you can just leave it at default. All right, we go ahead and add our load balancer rule. And pretty much we are done here. So now, if we wanted to access our instances, we go ahead and click our IP here. But also let's go ahead and go back to our resource group. We're going to go to our scale set, and we see our scale set has been created. We see we have two instances that has been created. We see we have our public IP here, and our public IP should match our front end IP on the scale set itself. And then we see that here's our scaling policies right here. Our scale out and scale in policies, we go ahead and modify them right here if we wanted to. You could say you basically could check your disks out, the type of disk you have, and everything of the sorts. And even check to make sure your boot diagnosis is set up, and also check to make sure your do your password resets and things of that nature. Even got your upgrade policies where you can modify that. All right. So other than that, but then let's go and look at our instances itself. As we go inside of our instances each, you see that we can also in this panel where it says instances, we can stop the instance, kind of like how um, the virtual machine panel looks, where we basically start, stop, restart. everything from within here. All right, so let's go ahead and go inside instance one, and we see that its public IP is completely different. However, if we go to this public IP and we go ahead and we go here, we see we get our Lin0 um, machine. And if we want to go back to our instances and let's go to Lin2, we see this one has its own public IP as well. But if we click on it, we go ahead and we go to the IP. We see we got our instance one, our virtual machine one. So we're able to get access to both of the machines, so we could SSH to them if we wanted to, and things of that nature. And also, because we have the boot diagnostics set up, we could also go inside the serial port as well, and do things manually inside the port. Only thing is, I didn't set up a password for the instance, so it won't work. I won't be able to get into the instance. That's one thing I did forget to do. Uh, but it works nonetheless, and we see that we're able to access the VM. But only thing is, when we log in, oops, I forgot. It's gonna come back. It will come back to me. Yep. If we type in Azure user, which is the user that we have, it's gonna ask for a password. So that's what we do not have for these instances. So, but at least we know if we ever need to, if you ever need access to your instances, this is one way we know that we can access it in case that there's a outage or something like that. But the main thing of this video, this is about the load balancer, right? So we'll go over and work on scale sets and go in deep dive a little bit later on. But the main thing is we want to do is make sure we're able to access our instances from the over the load balancer. So if we go here, go to overview, we click on our IP. This is the same front end IP is the same IP as this one right here. And we go and click here, put it here. And we see right now we're connecting to our instance 0. And if we refresh a few times, eventually we'll go to number 1. Let's wait for a bit. And we go to, and then we refresh again, and we see right here we just went to 1. So we're load balancing between the two. Now we went back to 0, and then we wait a bit, then we go ahead and go again. We back at 1. So we see that the load balancer is working. The rules are working. We're able to connect to them. And then if we want to connect to our instances, we still can. We just go to PuTTY, and we go ahead. If we need to do any management type of work, we go ahead and go to PuTTY. We don't need HTTP. We just need the public IP. Go to SSH, open. Go to authorization, forwarding, agent forwarding. Click browse. Go to our lab key that we've created in the virtual machine video. If you don't know how to set up the PuTTY and everything, I went over that in how to create a virtual machine in the Azure video. And then all we gotta do is type in Azure user, or whatever user you gave your machine, and there you go. We're inside our virtual machine. And so we're able to access the instances. And also, let me make sure let me do a duplicate session. I'm going to do a new session, and I'm going to do it from this instance right here. And once again, remove the HTTP, and then do the same thing. Create our key, and then make sure we go up, sessions, and then open. Azure user, and boom, here we go. We're inside the machine. So we're inside. So we was able to access both instances at the same time. well, we were able to access both of them in both instances, and we're able to also be able to have our load balancer load balancing between them. And like we said, we're gonna go over how to set up the scaling policy. We're going to really put the scaling policy to work in another video and start showing you how it expands and stuff like that. Um, but I do appreciate you guys taking the time to check out this video series on the load balancer. Once again, we're gonna do another video on the scale set, so stay tuned. And if you like the videos, please go ahead and leave a like on the videos and subscribe if need be to support me. And I do appreciate everyone who has taken time to follow this load balancer series all the way up to now. And I do appreciate you guys taking your time to take a look at all these videos. All right. Thank you, and I'll see you in the next video. All right. Peace.